Yo, what's going on, midlife men? It is Dev Styles coming at you with Mr. Marcus down in Brazil. And we got a hot show for you today. This is a video that I've been excited all day, really wanting to do because we were going back on our normal messages and talking about some different topics. And, we just kind of started brainstorming and came up with an idea of what would we say to ourselves if we could interview ourselves back into the era we're going to look at is when we were in our early 20s, in the mid, or shall I say in the early 90s or late 80s. So we're going back late 80s, early 90s, when we were in our early 20s. What would we say to ourselves? What kind of conversation would we have? What would we say you should look out for? You shouldn't look out for? You shouldn't spend time worrying about? You should try to do this. You should try to work on that. Basically, we are the OGs of today about to go talk to our old selves. When people ask you that question all the time in interviews, what would you say to your 23 or 25 year or 30-year-old self? That's really what we're doing today. And so, but here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do various shows, and starting out with this one, we're going to be working our way through. Credit goes out to Neely Fuller on the 9 areas of people activity. These are areas of life that we all engage in, and all of them, they work synergistically, and they are all influenced by outside factors tremendously. And so what we're going to look at, the first one is going to be economics. And so, Mark, I'm going to let you start out setting the stage here. And if we go back to that time period, late 80s, early 90s, and when I say to you, before I say economics, just set the table for what was your life like in general terms around that time, just to kind of give a backdrop of where we're going to end up going.
Wow. If we go back to the late 80s and early 90s, it's still pretty vividly clear for me because I had a 40-hour job where I was doing 40, 45, sometimes 50 hours a week or whatever. And in my small world, that little money that I was earning, I thought I was doing something. It was like, we look at what was the minimum wage back then. We're looking at like, what, 335, 350, 360. Yeah. I think it was and 335. So then when I got another job and I moved up to like almost $7, I was like, balling. I was almost like I was balling, right? I had a car, it was a used little car, and I thought I was doing well. The funny thing about looking back at that is that sometimes I wonder the difference between how Black people are raised to look at things and how white people do, right? Because in some ways, in many ways, we're still so far behind where they are. I look back at those times and some of the white people that I knew, some of the white people that I would work with, they were already looking at advances that they wanted to make in their lives. There were guys that were going into fields of employment that I had never even heard of. And so here I'm looking at life like I'm making almost $7 an hour. I'm about to be making $7.50 and $8. By the time I get finished with this contract, I'm gonna be up to $12.50 or something like that. And I thought I was doing really good. And it was like, somebody was supposed to tell me like, dude, that ain't no money. It's like, somebody's supposed to pull us to the side and tell us the real money that's out there and how we're supposed to go about trying to get after that real money. This, it's like, I'm living at home. I got a little car, I'm hanging out with some women now. And I thought I was doing decent, and I just got kind of like in a comfort. Well, say that again.
He didn't say a woman, he said women. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm thinking I'm doing something, and somebody's supposed to tap you on the shoulder and say, no, this is just to get your feet in the game. This is not making it, and on top of that, it's like at that point, I'm still living at home. And I'm like, so I'm not seeing this money that I'm earning as something that I can live on. I'm looking at it as I'm living at the crib and I got this spending money. I got a car. I'm able to go out. I got a regular stream of income coming in. I thought I was doing good. But like I said, that conversation was missing. as to this whole world that's out here that I wasn't really aware of.
Yeah.
That's where I was at that time.
Wow, man, you just when you said that, you already made some things jump to my mind. I have to say I was definitely much of the same. Now, I was coming out of a white school, a white high school. So I had already started noticing as well that difference between what was going on in our neighborhood, where how Black folks were living, and certainly how folks were living in the suburbs where I went to school at. And then, of course, even visiting my relatives who lived in nice suburban neighborhoods out in California. So watching them, I had already had a perspective of, at least I'll say, outside of our Black neighborhood, which now that I look back, a lot of Black kids didn't have. And so that on one end helped, but then on the downside, I was still in the rut of what was going on in my hood. Even though I was aware and I was around people who were doing, I'll say, greater things, or at least I'll say they were maturing, I was hood maturing. And I like how you said that, because my hood maturing was exactly what you noted. You know, I worked at a store that we both worked at that was the equivalent of a Walmart today. We'll just say that. It was that we just call it that grocery store life, that clerk life. And so same thing, man. I was making $3.85. Boy, I started out 50 cents higher than minimum wage. Look at that. I'm sorry. Let me get this correct. I rejected that job. Actually, I started at $5.25 because I had a chance to take the $3.85 job. I started at $5.25. And then, like you noted, over the years, my pay was steady going up. But I didn't realize the copper handcuffs that I was putting on myself. And so all through the early 90s, I really wasted a lot of it. Now, you did better than I did. You were working full time. I didn't even work full time. I worked part time all of those years. And same thing, I wrote down here, spending money. I thought I had some spending money, but my spending money left because I had a son. And so having a son at an early age as a teenager, once again, I still saw how other people were living, but I was living like folks in the hood, having babies out of wedlock, or shall I say, becoming a baby daddy. Also, that side of living in my parents' home, I wasn't thinking about how to move out. And worst of all, I wasn't thinking about how to go to college. I had given up on that dream. And I had really given up on that dream when I had a son, because then my closest friends, they went off and started going to college. And that, I mean, when I look back at that time in my life, man, I realized I truly did give up on my own dreams. It was like the guy I thought I was going to become. When I hit my late teens, early 20s, I realized this guy was really, I was like a doggone, former slave that had been released after the Civil War. I was just wandering. I didn't know what to do. And so that's that kind of that backdrop for me.
Dude, that was the perfect word that you just said. It was like, damn, because I hit that same period where I was drifting. I didn't know, I was wandering. I didn't know where I was going. It was like, after high school, I immediately, after graduating from high school, I immediately started college. But something was not clicking there because I could not find the area where I said, this is where I belong. In those first 4 years after high school, I tried to go to college like 2 or 3 times. First it was at a major university. Then I went to like a couple of community colleges, and I just bounced around trying, I got into like business management. I studied a little bit of marketing, and I wasn't feeling it. So by, let me say, the end of the 80s and tapping into the early 90s, I had already started and left the university life because I just didn't know the direction that I was going in. So this little job that I had is it kind of froze me in time for a minute there until I could find out where I was going. Now, after this event in 94, when my father passed away, that's when it really hit me like, okay, where am I going? What direction am I going in? And that's when this transition really started happening with me, because, I discovered this whole world of literature that was explaining things, that was filling in the blanks with the education that I got from, let's say middle school to high school left me with a lot of questions. And some of those books that I was reading by that time was starting to fill in some of these blanks. So by that time, I was really ready to start exploring more information. And that's when we come into that, we talking about closing out the 80s and moving into the early to mid 90s, where I started making that transition. So I'm definitely there with you. I was totally wandering at that point because I didn't have a direction.
Ironically, this is when we met at the same time period in our lives.
I'll never forget that day.
We're gonna talk about that in another
episode. We'll leave that for the sex and relationships discussion.
right. But folks, I think the one thing that I think both of us bring to the table in this conversation is, although we're over twice the age of what we're talking about then, we're going to take the role of being OGs, saying, come on here, young man, pull up a chair, let me talk to you for a minute. So we're going to go back and talk to our old selves in that time period. And the good part, and both of us were talking before I hit record, the good part is we were the type of dudes that, I'm going to say, because I did have some clashes with some older people, can't lie. But if I didn't like people just coming down on me immediately, because I already felt bad enough about myself, especially as we get to the mid 90s, I already felt like I was enough of a failure. And so there were times where I may have had relatives or some older folks just be like, boy, how come you're not in school? Or why aren't you in college? And I was just like, no, I want to go, and I did, but I was mad at myself that I had passed up that opportunity. But if an old person came to me and really approached me correctly, at least in my interpretation of correctly, I know because I've always loved talking to old folks. I love talking to older people. And so I would have listened. So I know some people may be watching this, be like, well, at the end of the day, y'all wouldn't have listened to nothing some OG would have told you anyway. That's not true. That's not true. No. Yeah, exactly. And so we are going to talk to our younger selves. And so, Mark, I'll start with you. Now let's focus in right on economics. If you had a chance, let's pull up that chair. You about to talk to your young self. What would you share and try to school your young self on about economics and how that is going to impact him when he gets to be your age now?
Oh man, where do you start with a question like that? It's like, I'm going to pick up on, like I said, my concept of what is good money, and it's like, okay, what is the minimum wage in the US right now? Do you know?
I think it is approximately $12, but I will look that up.
Okay. Because what I'm saying is, like I said, when I got into into working, I started, it was $3.35. I will never forget that. And I started working part-time, and I'm bringing home, I'm only working a couple of days a week when I first started working. So I'm bringing home checks with like 70, 80, 90, $100 in it. Right. And I'm like, man, I got some money. So I have to look back now and be like, dude, you don't know nothing about money. You think these little scraps that you earning is something that you can live on. You're stuck in a very small world and very small thinking. This little money that you earning right now is not enough to earn, to take care of a family. It's not enough to pay a car note. It's not enough to put down money on a house. It's not really enough money to seriously get into investing. So it was like, if I'm looking back now, I have to explain to my younger self, like, you haven't even really got your feet wet yet, and you're being led astray. It's almost like you are in this environment where everybody who is around you is looking at the world in the same way. All of the guys I was surrounded with at that time, we all kind of looked at the life at the same kind of way. And it was like, this is good money. I got enough money to go watch a movie or whatever it might be. And I'm not seeing the broader picture because nobody's really explaining it to me that way. I know this is not this is where I'm supposed to end up. But at the same time, nobody's telling me what this real world is all about. I mean, I remember in that same place where we worked, there was this guy I knew. I didn't know him really well. I'm just talking about the differences between how the small world that, in some ways, a small world that Black people were growing up in versus how the world that white people were looking in. And I knew this guy, and he was studying something called robotics. And I'm like, what is robotics? And this is 30 years ago. I'm like, I had no idea what that was all about, because I didn't have anybody in my family. I didn't have anybody in my network of friends who were into something like robotics. And so here I am, I'm moving up the pay scale, but them little increments. Like I'm saying, it shows you how small my world was when I'm thinking that I'm making $7 an hour and I'm doing well. Mm-hmm. So looking back now, here it is 25, 30 years later, I would have to sit down with young Marcus and be like, dude, you got a long ways to go. Your world is too small. You have to open up your mind and expand to see what else is out here. Because if you think this is something big, God, the big fish in the small pond type of thing. And it's like, you go from being in this small little lake and all of a sudden somebody throws you in the ocean and you see what all of these big sharks are doing. That's what I would have to say to myself. Like, dude, you're not doing nothing. You are stuck in a very small world. So that's where I would start a conversation with my younger self.
Just to give you an update, now where I'm at is $12, but in the state we're from, it's $9.65 today, minimum wage.
Huh? Wait, what?
Yeah, I know.
Say again?
It depends on the state. So in Arizona, it is $12 minimum wage, but in our home state, it is $9.65.
Damn. $9.65.
$9.65. I'm going to have to agree with you, and I'm going to think of a moment. And I probably should have asked my cousin to join me for this one, because we often look back at those years at how much money and time we wasted. And I'm not going to go completely into time. I think that's going to really come into all of our areas that we look at. But there is money and time are very much related. Mm-hmm. And one time, I would offer to pay him to skip work, or he'd pay me to skip work. We came up with every reason in the world.
Don't get me started on that.
I know you were the king.
You don't want me to go there, dog. Really?
You were the king. But my point is, it was a case where, like you noted, we did not understand the value of money, thinking that we had some money just because we got a paycheck. And really, for the first time in my life, I could go shopping and buy something I wanted to buy. I thought I had some money, but I really didn't. And so one question, I would go back and I would look at myself, and I would have a seat and I would say, do you know what a salary is? Now, I'm guessing my young self back then would have, and I'm sad to say this, but I would have said, that's just amount of money that you get in your paycheck. And I'm sure, myself today would say there's a difference in someone who gets paid by the hour and someone who gets paid salary. And I would have explained the differences. Now, that certainly does not mean that there's a difference in class. Don't get me wrong. But at that time in my life, I had no idea what it meant to have a salary job. I thought all jobs, you get paid by the hour. So much like in the same way people today go buy cars, the most ignorant thing, and I'm sorry if this is you watching this, but I'm telling you, you are a stone cold idiot if you walk onto a dealership lot and you go in there and you say, the salesperson comes out and they say, look at, you see, you're going to buy a car. You're like, yeah, I am. And the first thing the salesperson is going to do is they're going to say, so how much can you afford per month? That has nothing to do with the price of the car. And yet, that's in a way how I used to be looking at a job. Well, how much are you going to pay me per hour? And well, someone can tell me we're going to pay you X amount per hour. And like you said, I'm comparing myself to the people that I'm around. So for me, making $5.25, I was making good money because a lot of my friends that didn't go to school or didn't go to the military, they were making $3.35, $3.85, $4.25, slinging burgers at McDonald University. So, they went to Hamburger U, and I'm thinking, I make more than they do. But I have to say this real fast. One of the first introductions that I would say, son, you need to start looking at people who are working on a career and have a salary and ask yourself, how much do you hope to be making in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? And if you aren't on that path to having or making a certain amount of money on your salary, whether it's one that you're a salary you're earning because you're in business for yourself, or salary maybe it's because you do want to have a job. But one thing I didn't have a hustle. So I couldn't work to get paid by the hour and make a lot of money. And I would have told myself, you need to be working to get that salary.
Dude, okay, wait. I know we're focused on this late 80s, early 90s to mid 90s period, but to give you another idea of, I'm saying this thing I'm talking about, how small we're thinking because of the small world that we're living in. Now, mind you, into the 90s, going into the 21st century, that's when I started really wanting to understand the outside world, the outside of the United States borders. So that's when I started getting into this Brazil thing. But just to finish off what we're talking about, looking at the world in such a small manner, I will never forget this. It had to have been the year 2000, 2001. I know I'm a little bit forward, but it's still on the theme of how small we're thinking. I was working afternoons at that point, like mid-afternoons. And I had this particular manager, and he just didn't care how many hours I was working. He was like, it was almost like a blank check. Work as much as you want, right? So I'm like, I'm going to test this. So, regular is 40 hours. You might do 45, but I was like, okay, I'm going to push it. So one week I did 54 hours. The week after that, I did 78 hours. The next week, I did 90 hours in 1 week.
Wow.
I worked 7 days, and I will never forget. I counted the minutes at the clock, waiting for that exact moment where I could punch out and say I had 90 hours, right? Do you know how much money I made for working 90 hours? Okay, let me just set this up, because this is what I'm telling you. I remember, I'm not going to say his full name, but I'm going to just say the head of our store at that time, his name was Roger. I'll never forget this. And I was closing in on that 90-hour mark. And I don't know what he was doing. I was building this I don't know, it was a end cap with, product that was on sale. And he came and stood next to me. It was almost like he came and put his feet like right next to my feet, and he was just standing there, and he wasn't saying nothing. And he was like, he said something to the degree of, you're doing a really good job or something like that. And I was just like, what is that all about? It was like, it struck me that he knew that I was banking all of these hours, right? But what kills me about it, and again, thinking small dog, I think I got $1,100 for that week. I worked, dog. I'm like, dude, I got $1,100 in 1 week. I mean, taxes chewed up about half of it, all of the money that I earned. I really thought I put in 90 hours, and all I got was $1,100. That sticks to me now. So we're talking about, again, thinking very small. Yes. I went from 54 hours 1 week to 78 hours to 90 hours, and all I had to show for it was $1,100 out of 90 hours of my week. Yes. Unbelievable. Yes. I mean, how much, do you have an idea of how much money you think would be a fair payout if you put in 90 hours of your time in 1 week? How much do you think you're supposed to earn?
Right.
Any idea? I mean, would you take a shot in the dark, or is this, you can't really calculate what would be a fair payment for that?
I've been salary for the last 12, 16 years of my career. So to me, I look at it as there might be some weeks that I may have to do well over 40 hours. There's some weeks that I technically don't. So I don't even know how to think on that terms, because I look at the cost I look at how much time is me working. How much money am I going to make in the time that I'm working? I'll put it that way. So I have my salary that I have in mind for my company. Then I have the amount that I'm worth per hour. So I couldn't even think about how much I'd be making if I work 90 hours.
Okay. And just the last thing I'm going to say about that is that after I finally got out of that job, I was working a regular job where basically that's what I was earning just working a regular week, say 40 hours. So I'm like, it took me 90 hours at that previous job to earn a check that I was earning basically weekly in the next job. And that next job that I got was salary, because the job we were working, we were earning wages. We were working hourly. So finally, when I got a quote unquote real job, I'm making the same money, the money that it took me 90 hours to get where we were working at the real salary job. Well, this is what I'm making now, and I'm only working 40 hours.
Yes.
So again, small thinking.
Yes. And I'm going to piggyback on that, because I'm going to go back, and I messed up. I didn't finish where I wanted to go when I was talking about my cousin and I. One of the things we did, we wasted that money, and we look back at how much money we could have had, even if we would have tried to take some trips and go out. Ooh. So I look back, I would go to myself and I would say, the money that you're making now, if you start saving that money at that, we'll just even say after you've been working at that store for 2 years, from that point on, what about opening up an IRA? What about your 401k? And I remember, I mean, this, hey, I love my parents, but my parents didn't teach me anything about money. And so I will never forget at that store when they were moving away from pensions, and they started talking about this thing called a 401k.
I remember that period.
I remember this guy who worked there. I didn't like him too much, but I remember, now to look back at him, he was a grown man, and I still had a child mentality, although I'm in my mid-20s at this time. And this guy, they're talking about 401k. I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't know what a 401k was in my 20s. I didn't know what an IRA was in my 20s.
Right.
I had no idea when retirement. I literally had worked there so long, I started thinking about, well, okay, maybe I could retire from here. And related to what you said, when I did finally leave and they gave me the amount of money that I had saved up in my pension, I had $800. And what did I do? Did I roll that over? I cashed it out. And now, as we know, that got hit 40%, cashing it out, because I didn't roll it over in anything else. So I would go back to my younger self and say, that money you're making, how much are you saving?
Dude.
What is your budget? And are you at least looking at what you're going to do in order to retire? Can you put a little bit away for your retirement? Because you need to understand the power of compounding interest. And I would have started with that conversation, sat down. It wouldn't have been a hustle like other people used to talk to us about when they selling certain insurances. And y'all know who you are. When you're selling certain insurances, I would have told my younger self that without any strings attached, because son, you need to learn this.
Dude, okay. I'm so glad you went there, because it took me back. I don't know exactly what year it was, but I distinctly remember when there was this talk about this 401k plan. And we're talking early 20s, and I'm like, well, what is that? Nobody told me what that is. And I remember there was this older white woman that I used to work with. I mean, she had to been in her late 50s, up to maybe the mid 60s at that point. And I remember at that point, we didn't have direct deposit. So every Friday we would go to the back room and they would give you your check, and then they would cash it for you right there. And you just walk out with this money. And every week on that Friday, she would say, Mark, you need to get in on this 401k. I'm like, for what? I mean, what is it? Nobody even told me. I didn't even know what it was. I just know, I mean, I got to put some money away. It was just like, man, I'm sure you've had this conversation with yourself, at least in the last decade, where I look back now, dog, if I had to just put away 10%.
Yes.
If I had to just put away 10% at that point, that when I finally left that place, I could have easily had $50,000, $75,000 put away. But I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't thinking big. I wasn't thinking of the future. I was just thinking this little $300, $350, $400 a week that I'm making, oh, I'm doing well. I wasn't thinking nothing about it. And it was like nobody pulled me to the side and just said, look, this is not the way you do this. Yes. You making a little bit of money now, and it's enough money because you living at home that you could do something with this. Like, that just never occurred to me. Yeah. And nobody, it was like getting this 401k program, but nobody told me really what it was all about. And it was like years later when I got that, well, quote unquote, real job. And it's like, okay, we got a 401k plan. And if you stay with our company 5 years, we will match the 401, what you invested in it. And I'm like, why didn't somebody explain this to me when I first had the opportunity to get in on it? So that's a conversation I would have with my younger self. Like, I'm not telling you to put away 50%. I'm not telling you to put away 40%, but if you could just put away 10% of your after tax, you'd be sitting well by the time you leave this place. But that's a conversation I would have.
Yes, I think that would be a good one, because I think we as Black men, we don't learn that from our families. Not very many people teach it. I didn't formally learn it until the church I was going to. My uncle's church actually started talking about it. And a couple of the older fellas, they actually started having the conversation with some of the younger people in the church of this is what whole life insurance is. This is what term life insurance is. Those basic conversations that we just never had at home. And what really burns me up even more, my old self now, I will look at my young self and I will look at the kind of car he was driving. And I would say, you just got that truck. And I'll be like, got that truck, got that S10. I got that S10. It came out exactly 1 year before the model year. I had a 91 S10 in 1990, bought it in January 1990, right? I would be like, yep, you see it's white, got those rims. And I was looking, saying, did you finance?
Every time, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me say, did you finance that truck? And my young self would have been like, yeah, I did have to get a car note to cover it. Oh, did you finance those wheels? Yeah, I did. But the dude gave me a hookup though. He gave me a hookup. He sold them to me for only $2,100. So he hooked me up. Oh, all right. And then I would have said, yo, man, you do not need to be buying a car. First of all, you do not work full time. Second of all, you have a child. Third of all, you don't make that much money. And fourth of all, if you want to get to that mythical salary that you told me you want to make in your life one day, you don't get there by paying interest to other people. And so I would have told this young man, I love cars. Let me tell you, you will not find a bigger car fan than I am. I love cars, but I also understand that a house is at least an appreciating asset. A car is virtually never, unless you're buying some vintage ride, it's always a depreciating asset. So son, you are locking yourself up and you're going to pay this price for many years to come just because you want to have a hot ride now. And I think my younger self would have listened because my truck got stolen twice and I never saw it again.
Dog, every time we go back to that era, man, I will never forget this because it was like, it came right off of this record. And I remember one of my boys, we used to always roll to this particular CD, it was cassettes at the time. And there was a skit on the album. And my man was like, what you used to get? What you used to do? Jack them for them Nissan trucks. Right in the drive-through. Dog. And then you had a Nissan truck. I'm like, oh no. And then it got
an S10. I had a Chevy S10.
Oh, okay.
Well, but the other dude, we did work with a dude that had a white Nissan and he had Notorious on the Strength on the bed of it.
No, every time I think about that truck you had, every time I think about that truck that you had, that lyric pops into my mind, dog. It was like something I won't ever forget. Now, talking about cars that we had, and man, again, looking at salaries, looking at wages at that time, looking at car notes at that time, my second car was a Nissan Pulsar. And I was only paying $131 a month. So I thought I'm doing pretty good.
You talking my first show the viewers some of the cars we're talking about. And I know most of the people, non-car people especially, have no idea what a beautiful Nissan Pulsar is. Nor do they understand how big you are. That's the other part about this story.
You know what's funny? The funny thing about that is that you just said that is that I did not really notice this, dude, but my first car was a Chevy Chevette. And the Chevy Chevette is already small.
Yep.
But the girlfriend I had at the time, I went and picked her up one day, and I forget the kind of car she had. It was like a little small Buick something. And the Nissan was smaller than her car. And I'm like, I don't know if in my mind, the Nissan Pulsar was bigger than it was, but actually the Chevette was bigger than that Nissan Pulsar. And I don't know in my mind, this is again, this idea of thinking small. Dang, what you about to, oh man. No,
am I taking you back there? Am I taking you back?
Oh, dog. Mine was like a sky powder blue.
What I remember
unbelievable
is that my dad had actually rented a Pulsar when we went to California one year. And so I remember the blue one that you had because it was almost the exact same color my dad had rented. But continue.
I'm just, it's again, dude, just going into this mind frame of the small way that we're thinking. You know, I got this little car note. It was my first car note because the first car, my father just bought it for me outright, you know, just so I could have a car to get around or whatever. But again, going back, here's another thing that now we're getting into talking about like car notes. I would have a conversation with my younger self and say, well, you know how much money you paying for this car and how much money this car dealership is going to get out of you after you've paid all of this interest over the term of this, you know, how long you're going to be paying for that car. I didn't understand that at the time. It was my first car note. It's like years later, I'm like, I'm never going to have another car note. I prefer to come out of pocket and just pay cash for any car. I'm not going to have another car note. Oh my God. No, you didn't.
Look, man, I'm just trying to take you back a little bit while you're talking. Give people some visuals while you're going on. That's all.
You know, the funny thing is that the Chevy Chevette and the Nissan Pulsar were the same color. I don't know. You may not remember that Chevy Chevette, but
I do.
Again, dude.
When I first met you.
Really?
I know people buy their cars, and I remember you had that Chevette. Because it was like, how in the world is this big old dude bouncing that Chevette? What year did you have?
I'm telling you. Oh, man. What year was that? I think it was an 86.
86.
No. 81. It was an 81.
81. Good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an 81 Chevette. Yeah. Woo. That's it. That's that red one. It said mine was blue. That's the exact model right there.
Woo. All right, man. I don't want to interrupt your story. Continue with the car.
No, again, dude, it's the idea of thinking small. You know, I remember, you know, again, I'm a few years out of high school. I just remember seeing there were certain guys that would come to school. I'm just happy to have a car. And this dude's rolling up in my school, like in Cadillacs. They first car and they rolling up in a Cadillac. So again, my small brain, my small thinking, these are conversations that I would have with myself just to explain that the world is so much bigger than this little small world that I was living in. And like I said, it would take me years to figure out about these things about car notes and mortgages. That's a lesson that anybody at that age bracket should be taught before they get into these type of deals. You know, it's not something that you would know. And somebody's supposed to tell you that before you start spending your money.
Yes. And I'm going to go back to what I would say to myself to kind of, I think it will put every conversation that I would have in terms of economics in perspective. Just asking my young self, I don't care how much money you're making, do you have a budget? And do you even know what a budget is? And I probably would ask my younger self because this is something that I think talking to even young people now is kind of a good starting ground. And again, it probably makes people a little less combative because, you know, again, you don't want to be the old dude. Let me tell you something. But I think asking the question, what did your parents teach you about money? And just let them talk. And I know the conversation would have been extremely short of what my answer would have been on that. I would probably say, well, you know, get a nice car, get a good job. Always got to get a good job. And I did not want to go work at a factory. My dad worked at a factory and I heard all the racism and turmoil and I saw how hard he worked. I didn't want to go work at a factory, at a plant. And, you know, everybody in our hood worked at the plant, automotive plants. So
boy worked in a plant, you know?
Right. I didn't want to do that because I didn't like, to me, I saw that plant life. This is what you get out of it, and this is the end. And of course, looking back at it now, old brothers, man, they gave us a great life. But
Yeah.
I knew I could do more than that because I think I looked at all of the old guys and I'm like, y'all are much smarter than what that plant is utilizing. That plant is utilizing maybe doing this job, doing that job, this, that. But I knew all these old guys, man, they were geniuses up top. And I saw frustration that these guys had. So anyway, I don't want to go down that road completely, but I would start talking to my young self and say, what did your parents teach you about money? And since I would have said really nothing, then I would have said, okay, like I said, we're going to look at your car. And I would have talked to that. I already said that. Then I would have said, are you living at home? Of course, the answer would have been yes. And then I would have asked, so when do you plan on moving out? You a grown man. Why are you living in your parents' house? Mm-hmm. I'm sure you out here trying to see some ladies, but you living in your parents' house? When do you plan to get out? Because, you know, at that time, I think once you start getting into your 20s, that's something a young man should be thinking about, getting your own stuff. And I would have just made that point to my young self that, you know, grown men, and when you're sons, you're your dad's son, obviously. And so you're a grown man, you're now all competing for space. And I know your house isn't that big. So you might want to start getting your own spot. And I'm saving the best for last, if you will, but I would have started touching on, you have a child. You need to work on getting a home for you and your child because you have already started creating a family. Mm-hmm. So you need to get out of your mama and daddy's house. And I think that, I know me, that would have been enough of a slap because I knew the kind of dad and father I wanted to be. And so since having a child wasn't just having a child wasn't the impetus to get out of my parents' house and grow up, because everybody in the hood had kids and they were all pretty much living at home, especially the women. Women weren't running out getting their own place unless the state was paying for it in most cases. So I didn't think anything was really wrong with that. And I think that would have motivated me even sooner.
Man, I think back to that time because I was one of the few guys in the hood who didn't already have kids. You know, one of my best friends, I mean, by the time he was 25, I think he already had 4 kids. Woo! You know, one of the guys that I work with at that store that we talking about, I mean, it was like, he used to always joke, man, I'm gonna make a baby in every state in the country, right? Oh. I don't know how many kids he had, but I'm saying he started young and he had all of these kids and none of them lived with him. And I'm like, dude, that's not the example I really want to follow. Wow. It never really occurred to me, this idea of moving out, because again, my thinking is so small. Like, I'm earning this little paycheck, and for me, because I'm living at home, like I'm doing good. I'm getting my $350, sometimes $400 a week. I'm doing swell. I'm doing great. But I'm not thinking about, well, how well will you be doing if you paying for, you know, your house note, or you're paying rent, you paying a car note, you paying for insurance, and let's not talk about insurance. In the city that we were living in. Mm-hmm. It was like the little money that I was making at that point would not have sustained anything really. But in my small thinking, this again, thinking so small, I didn't really start having these thoughts until, you know, I told this story one time when I was going to a community college, and I told that story because I can't remember exactly when my father asked me this question. It had to have been in the early 90s, maybe. And he asked me some kind of mess I had got into, and I can't remember exactly what happened. And he looked at me one day and he was like, you know, what are you going to do when I'm not here?
Really? Wow. Wow.
He said that, and it made me pause for a minute because I can't remember exactly what had happened. It might have been every Black male is going to have some type of run-in with the police, whether you living on the good side of the law or you're not. You know, I never was into criminal activity, but just being brown skinned, you're still going to attract attention. And I remember one particular night, I can't remember the name of that mall. It was way out in the suburbs. I don't know. I can't remember the name of the mall, but me and a friend of mine were coming back and we got pulled over. And I can't remember if my license was suspended or something, but we ended up being, we got taken down. He my parents had to come and get me, and it might have been after that where he just, what are you gonna do when I'm not here? And it was like a couple years later, he was gone. And I told that story, we were in the community college and we were telling some of our, I don't know, important lessons in life or whatever. And I remember I told that story and everybody was at the end of the class, everybody was looking at me like stunned, like the class was completely silent because that's when the coin really dropped, when I realized he wasn't there anymore, and that's the time when I really had to start collecting my thoughts and understanding like, okay, this is the real world. Now it's time to start having these thoughts that you were not having in the last 7 to 8 years. So it took something tragic in my life for me to start taking things a little bit more serious and getting outside of the box that I was living in. So I wish it didn't have to be triggered by my father's death for me to start having thoughts that I should have been having years before that.
Man, that's deep. That was deep. I guess I will kind of pivot because you opened up the one to this, what I said. I'll save the best for me for last, because in order of if I had to put it in terms of priority, it's really the first one I should have brought up. I would look at my younger self, and the OG of me today would say, what kind of father do you plan to be for your son? And what are you going to do financially to make sure your son is taken care of? And I have to admit that I financially was not in a position to take care of my son nearly as well as I could have been. We can talk about should have been, that's one thing, but I know what I could have been doing. It was the fear that I had to go out and work 40 hours because I hated that job so much. I felt like if I would have made that transition to become a full-time employee, man, I might as well just jump off the Grand Canyon. I'm all in at that point. And that's why I never wanted to go full-time in my position.
That's intriguing. That's really, I have to, let me just interject real quick because it's intriguing that you saw it that way. Whereas I saw it as, I can't work 24 hours because if I work 40 hours, I'm getting a bigger stack of money. It never occurred to me because after I made the transition from working in this food place to transitioning to the other job, my salary almost doubled. And once I made that transfer to the other job, it was just like, it was automatic. You're working 40 hours. I started working midnights, you got the extra little premium bonus for working midnights or whatever. And the checks were just looking pretty decent to me. And I'm like, I had got accustomed to that. So there's no way I was going to cut back to 24 hours. So it's like the company that I had, the fellas that I was hanging with at that time, they made that job, how can we say it was manageable.
Yeah.
We would go in there, we would cut up, we would have a good time. We all came in at the same time. We would go home at the same time. We would act a fool. And it just put me in a real comfort zone. So to maintain the lifestyle that I thought was decent at the time, it never occurred to me like, I didn't love the job, but I liked the little paycheck that I was getting. So I wasn't going to cut back on my hours.
Yeah. Now, see, for me, if I would have gone full time, I would have been working with mostly old women. And so there was the people that I hung around with, they all did kind of, I did it sometimes as well, where during the holiday season, things like that, you work a bunch of hours. Usually I would be put outside to work. So I like being by myself. And so it was manageable, but none of my boys were working full time. They all worked part time. And so now when full time or part time for us ranged anywhere. I mean, 20 hours, man, it's never a week I only had 20 hours. I mean, it had to be a real intentional, like I'll probably say over the course of a year, you might at best have about 2 to 3 weeks, you might only get 20 hours. Generally, it was always ranging between 30 and 35 hours, sometimes 6 days a week. So some people went full time just to have 2 straight days off or just 2 days off. So it still was horrendous. But in my mind, it was funny. I had made this line in my own mind. Like, Dev, if you go full time, you are now selling your soul to this place. You're never going to leave. And the good part is, I will say this is where my son comes into play. Because I was never going to really be guaranteed a certain amount of days off, I also felt full time. You never knew if you were going to have like Monday and Wednesday off. I didn't have the seniority to have a solid 2 days in a row.
Oh, man.
So I always worried I'm not going to be able to really see my son if I work 40 hours. And me and his mom, we were hanging up enough as it was, let alone if I really had to move visitation around like that. So at least if I only worked a certain amount of hours, I had enough time to spend with him. And I will say I did spend that time with him. But the thing I did not do, I was not nearly as responsible financially as I could have been for him. And so that, looking back, that was a major failure on my part, because I should have been working more, or better, either A, certainly should have been working more, or B, during those early 5-6 years of his life, I should have at least been transitioning. And it was a transition I didn't start making until my mid to late 20s. In his life, where then, okay, dad's not working as much because dad's going to school, so dad can get a career, so dad can really set you up a little later. But that wasn't my thought early on in his life.
Now, you brought up something else, and this is why, this is what's cool about us having this experience at this same place, because you brought back some other things that, again, small thinking, okay? At that period where I was working full time, man, dude, I'm looking back now like, damn, these little jobs that we have give you enough to keep you comfortable where you think your world is fine. You think stuff is cool. You think it's good. So what I'm saying is, when I started working at this other place, I started off at the bottom of the seniority pole, right? First I transferred over, and I transferred over as a part-timer until I got enough seniority. I had worked 40 hours long enough to now I got an F by my name. Now I'm full-time, but I'm at the bottom of the full-time list. But as people continue to transition out, people quit, people get fired, every few months or so, my name would bump up on that schedule. So when I first started working the job, and like I said, I thought the money was good, I started off getting like Mondays and Tuesdays off. Then it got to Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Everybody wanted their days together off. So it was like Monday, Tuesday. I got the Tuesday, Wednesday. I got the Wednesday, Thursday. So by the time I got to Thursday, Friday, and then I got to Friday, Saturday, I thought I was on top of the world. There was this guy who he had been there a little bit longer than me, and he had full-time status before I did, even though overall I had more overall seniority than he did. I had been working at this place longer, but he had more full-time. And he used to always say, look, I don't care what's going on, as long as I get my Friday, my Saturday. He didn't say Saturday. He's like, oh, give me my Friday, my Saturday. And I used to look at that like, man, I'm going to get there one day. So I'm saying, I'm getting this little bit of money that I thought was good. I'm talking $350. Matter of fact, it started off at about $250, got up to $350. I'm thinking I'm balling.
Yep.
And now I'm getting Friday, Saturday off. You couldn't tell me nothing.
Yep.
I'm hanging out. I'm getting Saturday night. Now I'm hanging out at the club every first Saturday night. I thought I was living good.
Yes.
This is what I'm saying, looking back now, like all that time I wasted because in my small world, I thought I was doing good.
Yes. Well, I am going to tie that in. So I'll pull away a little from the serious stuff for a hot second and take it to something a little more comedic. I would ask my young self, I would say, check it out, man. Let me ask you this. Tell me you ain't out here spending money on these women, are you? And at least for once, I think that's where my young self would have perked up and be like, no, because that's something that I think young men of all of our age, no matter how much money a guy makes, and I tell my sons this all the time, and young men, you are never out from under the burden of performance. I don't care whether you're 18, I don't care whether you're 80. When you're 18, there's some woman you're taking out that's expecting you to pay. When you're 80, that woman that you've been married to for 55 years is looking at you like, what we gonna do with your pension check? You know, what you gonna do? And so that burden of performance is always there. And thankfully, I would look at myself and say, look at the young guy and my young self, and if I said, nope, I'm not out here spending a bunch of money on the women, I would actually congratulate him and find that silver lining to say, you know what, young man, all right, you got a nice car because you truly like nice cars, not because you're out here trying to impress some chicks. That's good. You did mess up having a baby. You really messed up, and you don't even realize how much money that's going to cost you. But I will say, young man, you're doing good. You keep doing the way you're doing now, at least in that area. Don't be spending money on these women, because once again, you will lose a whole lot of money chasing women, but you will never lose women chasing money. And so you keep focusing on what we're talking about now, getting your money together, and don't start tricking off your money like a whole lot of other dudes your age at the strip clubs, buying some funky fresh gear in order to go ahead and get some women, getting their new cross colors, getting their whatever is hot at the time back then, some FUBU, right? Stay on that path. Don't do it, son. Don't do it.
Damn, man. Now, looking back, I can't say I spent a lot of money hanging out with women, unless I was like really with somebody. And that's something else that I think back, like I wasn't really, how can I put it? I wasn't one of these people that always had to have the latest gear, but I did splurge from time to time, dog. Again, in my small thinking, it's something that I look back on. I remember one of these guys that I used to work with, and you know who I'm talking about, because he had this Nissan and he had souped it up.
Yes, sir.
You know who I'm talking about. It's like,
I'm gonna find a picture so folks can laugh. No.
I mean, that wasn't ever me, just give me a car. I ain't trying to put all of this bull on, whatever. But I like to have a couple nice things here and there. I would have I'd have a gold chain. I have some, I had my suits when I was going out to the club. And I remember one day, me and him, we had got off work one day and we went out to Fairlane Shopping Center, and we both bought these full length leather coats. I spent $600 on that joint. Oh, wow. I was like, dog, like my small thinking. I didn't spend a lot of money on clothing, but if you're gonna be hanging out at clubs, you got to have your gear. And I'm just looking back now, like there was people that I knew, like there was a couple guys that I ran into on the crew who they were talking about investments.
Oh, wow.
There were people who, it was only a couple, very few of these guys I knew were talking about investments. So I distinctly remember a couple of these people. I wasn't really, oh God, no, you didn't. All right, well, if you're going to do that, you got to at least go to a 1990.
It was 1990? All right.
It was a 1990, if I'm not mistaken, because it was like new. It was either 89 or 90.
All right, let me find a 1990.
And he souped it up. Dog, it's so funny because, man, he had so many people jolted up with that car. One of the supervisors at that store, because of the way he had that thing souped up, and he used to park it by itself, alone, away from other cars, from a distance. Man, one of the managers was so, how do you got it? That's a BMW. How did you get a BMW? He was really psyched into believing, because in this manager's mind, how is this guy got more? How has he got a BMW and I got a station wagon? You know what I'm saying? It was like, that was really, again, our small thinking.
I have to at least be correct though. I mean, because for my car people on the channel that may be more like me, I have to get a perspective. The car really wasn't that sweet, because the car guys that worked at the place, we were like, oh, what did he do to that Sentra? And why would he do that to that Sentra? And so we looked at it, maybe this is a closer picture, but I'm not sure if I had the year right. We looked at it as, Man, that is nasty. It looked like the dude went into what was called Murray's at that time. It looked like my man went into Murray's and just got everything he could throw on the car. And so, folks, I'm not exaggerating. When you see these wheels, it was kind of like that. He had ground effects. Shout out to my son that's like, ground effects? He had ground effects and had these little, what are they, 13s? Yo, I keep them clean though. So he had these little caps.
Remember, he had fog lights. He souped that. I mean, it was like a Batmobile, dog.
But he was in a Nissan Sentra. Small world. You know?
Couldn't tell him nothing. This is what I'm saying. This is the theme of what I'm talking about, our small thinking.
Yep.
You know?
You're right.
So, man, we have to prepare ourselves and our kids a lot faster. That's what it is. That's what it boils down to. The conversation that I would have with my younger self, looking, back in retrospect, where I could be if I would have had the conversation with who I am now with that 20 to 25-year-old self then. I swear I would be in a different place.
All right, so I'll start wrapping it up with that then. I think you started going in that direction. So let's kind of begin to wrap it up with that. Okay, in summary, what would be those areas that we definitely would sit down and say, so I would say, okay, so here, we've talked about a lot, talked for an hour. I know, you're young, you got a good memory, but you're probably thinking on you going over your girl house or something after we get done talking. So, son, I want you to remember these things I'm telling you. I want you to, first of all, prepare a life for your son. I want you to be a hardworking man for your son and understand the value of money. So to do that, I want you to focus on getting a job or an education or something so you can start making some real money, because you think you're making real money right now, but you're really not. And the way I know it, because I've talked to you, you got a lot more going on up here than you think you do, than what this grocery store is using. So I want you to now start thinking how much money you can make using this and not what this grocery store has you doing. And I want you to use that to start making some real money for you and your son. What I want you to do with that money, as it comes in, I want you to start saving some of it, because I want you to understand the compounding power of interest. I want you to understand that the $5 you save now, what that 5 turns into 50, that 50, and before you know it, turns into 100, that 100 turns into 1,000, that 1,000 turns into 10,000. And because believe me, man, look, I'm already 50. Before you know it, you're going to be 50. The dollar you start saving at 20 is going to be a whole lot larger than the dollar you start saving at 40 when you get to 50. And then I would say, and so the way that you do that, I don't want you buying another new car again. You like cars, go drive some cars like you drove last time. You told me you had some other rides that were pretty cool you like. Man, don't buy a new car. Don't make a point to yourself you would never buy a new car again. Right. Really, I say you're not going to even pay for a car note, not have a car note. But if you can't get there, at least start by saying, I'm not going to buy a new car. And I want you to work toward never getting a car note. And then lastly, don't spend money on women. Keep doing what you're doing now. You and your son. Stay the course. You're right. Take your time and take your money and invest that in you and your son and creating a better world that one day, when you do get a chick to bring inside your kingdom, you've already created it for you and your son. She's coming inside what you've already built. You won't need a woman to help you build anything.
Man, looking back, and this is something that I'm definitely going to do with my own kids. I wish, looking back now, like, damn, I wish my folks, knowing that I didn't quite get it at that time, what would have been a good idea is like, look, every Friday you come home with your check, you giving me 10 to 20%. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm saying that still leaves me with, 75, 80% to do what I want to do. But you get accustomed to putting this 10 to 20% away and you don't even miss it. And then before you look up in 10 years, this money you didn't even miss, and look what it's become because of the way it was invested. I'm looking back now like, damn, that's some money I probably would not have even missed. I would have found something stupid to spend it on, you know?
Right.
So this is something that I'm definitely going to do, you know, when my kids get to that age. You know, I'm like, you're not going to understand this right now because at, you know, late teens and early 20s, I didn't get it. I was just having fun and I was living in my small world. But I think that's a duty of parents to be able to take control of their kids at that point until they're ready to assume that responsibility. Because at 19 or 24, I still wasn't there yet. And I was working enough where I could have had some serious money by the time I just hit, say, 35, but I wasn't there yet. I got in the game late because I was living in my small world.
You know, let me add on to that one other thing. I guess I would ask my young self, so you paying rent to your parents? Because you said you're still living there, and I already told you probably shouldn't, but you know, if you're gonna live there for a while, you paying your parents rent? No, I had to pay them rent. I mean, you know, I'm helping them out. My brother, my sister there, so I'm, you know, kind of the older babysitter and stuff. So no, I don't pay them any rent. Then you know what you need to do? You need to pay them some rent because your parents don't owe you a roof over their head. And you just told me your dad went down to that factory and worked hard, worked long. When does he finally get to reap some of the benefits of his labor? Now that you're a grown man and you there, you need to start helping the burden that he has on carrying that household. And so your mom, if your mom working, you know, your mom, you need to help her out, help carrying the burden for that household. And right now you're not doing nothing. If anything, you know different than your younger brother and younger sister. You're another mouth that they have to feed. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm sure my young self probably would have been pissed to hear that. Then that's when I'll be like, man, you know, but I needed to hear it. And unfortunately, I think nobody told me, nobody wanted to tell me, but I think that's something that, you know, you made me think of that. Young people do need to hear that. You pay some rent, and once again, it forces you to get out and get your own, because you realize, why am I paying rent to live at home? I could be paying this money to have my own spot with no curfew, my own room, my own toilet. I fart when I want to, do what I want to do. I can turn the AC on, turn the heat on, open the door, let the AC out. Don't have to hear nobody. I can leave lights on. We all know you won't do that in your own spot because you're paying for it, but you at least have that opportunity. And so I definitely would have told myself that. And I wish, again, that's regret I have. I wish I could have helped my parents out more, but I was too immature. I was way too immature.
Yeah, we again, I think just growing up Black, there's certain things that we're missing out on just coming to the plate. You know, white folks, this is something that I don't think they necessarily, to some degree, I believe they do know this. I think they do know that they have certain information that they're just accustomed to having that we still don't have yet. Yes. You know, there's the conversations that they have about passing on wealth, about, you know, this house is worth this, I'm investing this in my son, or whatever it might be. These are conversations that we didn't have growing up in the hood. And it's like, you could be 10, 15 years later than somebody white, you know, in your same age bracket, and they already have this information. They already know about mutual funds. They already know about putting, you know, investments in stocks. They already know about 401ks. They already know about IRAs. And it's like, damn, I'm into my mid-20s and I'm just hearing about this stuff. So we have to start our kids a lot earlier, because the people who are much lighter skinned than us, they're already there. They already know.
Well, you said something, I really want to wrap it up on that point. So before I throw this last thing out there, is there anything else that you would want to say in summary to your younger self before we come back?
I think I covered it basically in everything that I've said leading up to this point. Put away, you working, put away 10 to 20% of this income that you're making. Don't buy any new cars. Try to avoid a car note. And understand that this money that you're making right now is little money. It's not something that you can really build a life on.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Now you said something that I think is probably a perfect way to wrap this up, actually. Obviously, hopefully this is out in YouTube world. And two things. Number one, we have sons. So the great part, we do get a chance to talk to our younger selves. We do get a chance to basically say, I was right where you were at blank age. And so, and I tell mine this all the time. I am telling you things I wish my parents would have told me. Now, maybe my parents didn't tell me because they didn't know. No one taught them. You know, the information wasn't easily accessible as it is now. However, they still could have got it. You know, look, the bottom line is knowledge is always available to get. It depends on how bad you want to go after it. But number two, this is what takes me to whoever's watching right now that may be in their late teens, early 20s. There's no excuse. You do not have to go to the library and look up in a book in the Dewey Decimal System. You have a computer that either you look in to search up porn, you on WorldStar, you doing whatever else you're doing on your computer, or as you might have heard on some of our other videos with my boy Kurt, who's a teacher, no one wants to go past Google page 1 to find what they're looking for. You have these things that even if your parents are not teaching you the things you need to know when you get older, number one, you get to go to YouTube and find old brothers like us telling you. But number two, even if we mention something that you still want to learn more about, 401k, a pension, which by the way, in most jobs you're working for don't even have a pension any longer. Stocks, mutual funds, the damage that you do buying a car. The first time I started looking at my finances, I was in my late 20s by a guy named Larry Burkett. Larry Burkett had a thing called the envelope system with a budget where you take your money, you put it in different envelopes. So I ended up creating envelopes. This envelope said savings. This envelope said entertainment. This envelope said car. This envelope said insurance. This envelope said grocery. That was the first time someone had ever said you don't spend every amount of your paycheck. And then I ended up listening later on to this guy that you can find out about right now. Go look him up, Dave Ramsey. So, and there are countless other people out there telling you how to spend your money in a good, positive way. So now, and I always tell my young people this, they make sure there are enough distractions out here that you don't take the time to find out the knowledge. Because Mark, you just hit on it. We didn't learn it. And so unless someone told it to us, we almost had to at least find out. You don't know what you don't know. I'll put it that way. But if we wanted to find out, we at least know, okay, I need to go buy or find a book to find it out. Young people listening to this right now, you have it right there at your fingertips. You have Robinhood that you can sit up there and trade stocks with on your cell phone. I didn't know how to do this stuff until the last few years of my life. What are you going to get? What are you going to go after? Because it's funny when you were talking about going on break and stuff like that with the people you worked with. How different is that with Fred Flintstone? Where Fred Flintstone and the whole rock quarry would get breaks they would all get off work, woo, and the big bird yell, and everybody gets off work with their lunchbox. And I know that's how your shift was. Y'all went on breaks. It's lunchtime, you know. I remember that. And so we can go back to the Stone Age. And here it is. Now, granted, I mean, if the Flintstones is fictional, I get that. But my point is, life didn't change much for us in that time of the late 80s, early 90s, as it was for our parents or as our grandparents. Our lives were set up very similarly. But today, our kids are going to be working and going to have different relationships with money and things that they can do with money and the knowledge about money they could have. It's going to be light years of a difference than just our generation. That's how fast. I can't even imagine wasting it.
We tell you the truth, I can't really imagine it. There's some serious changes coming down in this world that we live in, and this is not the time to discuss that. But one of these days we're gonna have to get into that discussion too. I really enjoyed this because because we come from that similar background and these experiences. It brought back memories of stuff that I had tucked away in the vault, and it just came back like crystal clear. Like, dang, we talking about 20, 30 years ago, and I still remember this, you know?
Yup. Well, good stuff as always, my brother. Good stuff. We're going to end that one right there, y'all. So this is, again, we looked at economics from the standpoint of going back, talking to your old self. The next topic I think we're going to cover, let me check and see this to make sure again. The next one I think is going to be education. I think we're going to take a look at, oh man, this is going to be hot. This is going to be hot. Education. What would you go back and tell your old self about education? School system? Going to college? Should you go to college? Maybe the military is a better option. What is an education? That's what we're going to talk about next time, y'all. This brother thinking already.
Well, just to end it, I had to toss in a hip hop clip some minutes ago that summed up what I was thinking when you were talking about that truck you used to have. And now that we're talking about the next subject, and we say, if I was to have a conversation with my younger self and the self that I am now, what about the education that you got back then? Because I was going to a private school and then I went to a school in the suburbs. I would simply say, you're blind, baby. You're blind to the facts. That's it.
That's the way to wrap this right there.
That's it. That's all I need to know. Like,
I would drop my mic, but we paid too much money for this. I learned the value of the money. All right, y'all. Like and subscribe below. We're going to be back with more. Peace.
All right, man. One.